Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
Were there any bakers in your family?
No, actually. A lot of cooks, but no bakers. We actually never really turned on the oven. It was used to store dishes and pots and pans, so it never really ever turned on.
Rachel Liu Martindale wasn't a natural-born baker, yet she's cultivated a unique brand, offering a whole slate of East Asian fusion pastries, black sesame snickerdoodles, mochi brownies, scallion sesame bread buns, lemon yuzu ricotta cakes, and her infamous chili crisp scone.
I have this scone that I really like making, and it's a cheddar, scallion, and bacon that I would start with, but I had a lot of customers tell me that they were vegetarian or they didn't eat pork, and so I was trying to figure out a way to take out the meat, but like also kind of incorporate some of that umami flavor. And so I think there was just one day I was in the shower and I was like, I think chili crisp would taste really good in that scone, and I wonder what that would taste like. And so I just did it. I just experimented one day and added it, and it was delicious, and it's now like our most popular item by far.
The scone is just one of her successful experiments. Rachel's creative cycle is fast-paced and constant.
We really strive to have different stuff on our menu pretty much every single week, which sometimes is a tall task, and we run out of ideas and run out of steam.
This is The Dish, a series where we talk with some of Michigan's most talented culinary wizards through one signature plate. I'm Mercedes Mejia. Today we're baking with Rachel Liu Martindale, the owner of Q Bakehouse in Ann Arbor. We'll learn about the journey of trial and error that led to her fusion cuisine, her quest to recreate the flavors of her childhood, and her tips for incorporating East Asian flavors. The Q in Q Bakehouse refers to a Taiwanese term used to describe the texture of certain foods.
Q, it's usually said that way in Taiwan, is a term that is used in Asia, but mostly specifically Taiwan, that describes the really chewy, bouncy texture of boba pearls, of homemade noodles, rice cakes, kind of that like that tension that you get when you chew on something, and it's really satisfying. And that's also a really high compliment, actually. It's like a texture that's really strived for in Asia. And to say something is Q is really a compliment.
Rachel says her appreciation for Q and for good food started at a young age.
Can you describe some of the pastries you grew up with?
Yeah, so we grew up eating Taiwanese pineapple cakes, which are kind of these like shortbread pastries that have a really thick pineapple jam on the inside. It's kind of the staple Taiwanese pastry. I ate those a lot. I ate a lot of milk bread buns, so what we sell here, but going to Asian bakeries and just seeing like a full shop of just bread. This very soft, pillowy bread, either filled with red bean or topped with the pineapple buns topped with like a vanilla cookie crust. Those ones were my favorite. A lot of pork floss buns. Like those are just kind of the things that we would eat for breakfast a lot, especially when we went to Toronto for trips. Something else that we would eat a lot are these like tapioca starch balls that are in like a soup. That's like a very common Asian dessert, is actually eating dessert soup and eating these like tapioca balls in those. And I grew up drinking a lot of boba milk tea, which is now very, very popular and you can find it anywhere. But back in the day when I was like 5 or 6, you could only really get it when you made it at home. So my mom would make her own tapioca pearls and milk tea, and we would drink that a lot. And so that was another common thing we would eat at home.
Rachel says her favorite channel growing up was Food Network. She and her grandma would watch all the classics together after school. But Rachel didn't do much of her own baking until college.
It was my kind of way to de-stress when I was in engineering school. And I worked in engineering for about 9 months after college. And then I quit my job. I worked in coffee, actually, and was a barista for a while. And I moved back to the Ann Arbor area and was working in coffee here as well, but then also worked at a startup for a little bit, like a technology startup in marketing. And so, just like a bunch of like random little things that I was doing while I was kind of soul searching and figuring out what I wanted to do. And I started baking in the evenings at home and slowly grew that actually by having friends who reached out and wanted me to make cakes for their events. And the word slowly spread from there and kind of grew from there.
That is a good jump. That's a big jump. Do you find that there's like some similarities between engineering and baking?
I definitely think so, especially the science part of it. Baking is very much an exact science, and that's how you produce the baked goods. It's all the chemistry and all ingredients interacting with one another, and so I do really love the precision of it, and I think that's probably why I like baking so much, is like my science background kind of translates well into it. And before doing this shop, I was mostly doing wedding cakes, and so there's a lot of engineering and building and decorating wedding cakes, and so I think that definitely they definitely mix, even though they don't seem like they're very related.
You actually had a previous business called Milk and Honey that was more of a cake shop.
Yes.
What inspired you to switch to Asian pastries?
Actually, it was probably the pandemic. A lot of time spent at home during lockdown, missing the food that my parents made, kind of rediscovering my roots and realizing how I didn't really know how to make a lot of the food that my parents made growing up. And so I spent a lot of the pandemic at home just like looking at YouTube and like just following different accounts that made specifically like Chinese and Taiwanese food, and really fell in love with remembering, I love this stuff growing up and I love tasting these things, and I want to know how to make this for myself, and realizing, there is like a room to play and incorporate these flavors that I really enjoyed growing up eating, and kind of incorporating into these more like Western American style pastries that I also enjoy.
That rediscovery led to her current bestseller, the Chili Crisp Scone. Imagine a triangular biscuit that's crispy on the outside and fluffy and tender on the inside. Nothing like a dry, crumbly English scone that you might nibble at with tea. This one is cheddary with flakes of green scallion and deep red chili crisp to add some bite. Rachel was gracious enough to walk us through her exact recipe.
I'm going to make a very small batch of just 8 scones, and we'll start with just the flour. So we'll add about 240 grams of flour, and then we'll add half a teaspoon of salt, half a tablespoon, and half a teaspoon of sugar. So baking powder in this recipe is what causes all the lift and the rise and makes the scones really tender, and it's a little bit more than what a lot of people might think is normal in such a small batch of scones. It's going to be about a tablespoon.
She tosses together this dry mix with her hands before grabbing a cold stick of butter straight out of the fridge. She cubes about half a stick and adds it to the bowl.
And so I'm just going to use my fingertips and quickly smash the butter into little pieces, leaving some little chunks of butter about the size of a pea, just to have that butter is what causes that expansion in the oven, and kind of giving it that like flakiness.
After it's all incorporated, she hand grates 113 grams of sharp white cheddar.
Put these little chunks in too. And so sometimes it's nice to have like a different texture, so you can do like the grated cheese, but then also have like these bigger chunks that will melt into little pools as the scone bakes, and then that turns into just get that texture, and they get nice and crispy. And then I'm going to also add some scallions into this, and I'm going to just eyeball the scallions for this, just because it's kind of your preference of how much onion you like in it.
I feel like a lot of baking is precision, but a lot of it is also just like you said, what you like and your own preference.
Absolutely. And I think especially in this type of stuff, it's kind of just, you can add however much you want. And the cheese, there is a limit because otherwise it might affect the texture, but like scallions, you can put a ton in there and it'll be fine, or you can or not put it in at all if you don't like them. So that's kind of nice about the flexibility with flavor sometimes. So this is the mixture that I'm going to just toss together and get it all evenly combined. And then at this point, this is the scone mixture that we would call here the scone mise, and then we keep it in the fridge. And whenever we want to make the scones and bake them off, we just add the liquid ingredients and then shape them and then put them in the oven.
Time for a break. When we come back,
it did not work at all. It was not at all like what I expected, and it did not taste good. So that was a huge fail, but I decided to just go a different route at that point.
More in a minute.
Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
The scone is just one of many hits on the menu. Q Bakehouse offers other savory brunch items, fluffy breads, sweeter pastries, but none of them are crazy sugary.
Is that something that you strive for? That balance that's like, it's more savory, but there is some sweetness.
Yeah, I definitely aim for not too sweet. That's like the most, I guess it was like the highest compliment that you can get, especially from like an Asian person. I grew up eating a lot of really light, not very sweet desserts, and so my palate is kind of towards that. And all of my experimenting when it comes to recipes is like, how much sugar can I take out of this recipe without sacrificing the texture of it? And that's definitely more my palate. And also I think the Asian palate in general is just having desserts and pastries that are just less rich and sweet. And I do think that that sets us apart a little bit in terms of like what we aim for in terms of our pastries.
What have you been experimenting with just recently?
Ooh, that is a good question. But this week I am trying to experiment with a new bun flavor, and we actually haven't done a taro, like just a taro paste bun in a long, actually ever. We've done like a taro cream at one point, maybe several months ago. And so I'm actually going to be experimenting with making our own taro paste and then kind of braiding that into a milk bread bun.
Has any of your experimenting like gone bad at all? Like,
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of flops. Not just from ingredients, but sometimes I just try recipes and they don't turn out, or they don't translate well into our commercial oven here. But my biggest one that I remembered from not too long ago is actually the White Rabbit candies that I pointed out earlier. And they're a really, really chewy caramel that like kind of gets stuck in your teeth when you eat them, and I had forgotten that texture when I was working with them, and I was trying to put them into a cookie. I thought it'd be really cool to have that like melty pool of toffee like texture, and it absolutely did not turn out how I expected it to. It was super hard and chewy, and like they did melt in the oven, but as they cooled they just turned it back into that hard candy essentially, and you couldn't even really eat the cookie without it just like completely sticking in your teeth. Yeah, it did not work at all. It was not at all like what I expected, and it did not taste good. So that was a huge fail, but I decided to just go a different route at that point.
yeah. Well, I guess would you call your style fusion or more traditional?
I would say there are some items that are more traditional and some that are fusion. So I think it's a mix of both. There are definitely some pastries that we make, like we're going to make mooncakes soon for Mid-Autumn Festival, and those are very much traditional pastries, like at least the style and the way of making them. The flavors might be a little bit more fusion, but the actual pastry is very much a traditional Asian pastry. But a lot of the other things we have on our weekly menu, I do think is more of a fusion, where it's either like an Asian flavor into a more Western style pastry, or an Asian baked good with like maybe some more Western flavors in it.
In the case of her scone, it's the former, a traditionally Western pastry infused with Asian flavors. We wrap up her recipe with the final 2 ingredients.
So we're going to add about 200 grams of heavy cream, and then we're going to add a tablespoon of chili crisp, and we use laoganma chili crisp, which is kind of the staple that pretty much I feel like every Asian household has in their house. And it's really flavorful, has a lot of umami, and is not too spicy, and I think that's the big thing. It just adds a ton of flavor, but it's just a little bit of heat. And I'm going to mix this together. So just until it comes together into a shaggy dough, and then I'm going to work it with my hands. Yeah.
Once it feels like the dough is just sticking together, still shaggy and slightly dry, she dumps the bowl into the counter to start forming the shape.
I usually kind of get it into a little circular pile, a little mountain, and then use this hand to push it down. And we're going for about like 3/4 to an inch in height, and that's how we kind of keep it as consistent as possible.
Rachel keeps shaping until the circle is even and just holding together. Then she cuts out triangles like a pizza. She lines them up on a tray, and they're ready to bake. For home ovens, Rachel recommends baking at 425 for about 15 minutes. The kitchen fills with the smell of cheesy, buttery dough, and the anticipation builds as Rachel pulls the batch of scones out of the oven.
All right, well, let's dig in.
Yeah, let me get you a plate.
Start with the little crispy bits. And it has that like croissant, like very flaky
Yeah.
texture.
Especially right out of the oven.
Right,
It kind of
right
has
out of the oven.
Yeah.
It's very soft and
Yeah.
it's not dry at all.
Yeah.
And it's not spicy. But
Yeah,
I can
that's-
feel it, like the kick, it's starting to
Yeah,
kick in.
Right. There's a little, it's like just a hint, but it's not like, I wouldn't say it's like spicy at all, right?
Every bite has like a different
Yeah.
taste because you get some scallions or you get more cheese.
Right. Yeah.
They're so good. No wonder this is your bestseller.
Scones are way easier than I thought. I think we often perceive pastries as requiring a lot of skill and experience and precision, especially when we want to incorporate new ingredients or flavors. But Rachel says baking doesn't have to be intimidating.
Yeah, so I think my advice for people wanting to incorporate more Asian ingredients into their food, matcha is super easy to come by now. So is black sesame, honestly. You could probably get them at like Kroger and Meijer, honestly. I don't know about matcha maybe, but definitely like black sesame. Miso is definitely available now. Gochujang is available pretty much everywhere. I think those ingredients in particular are much more accessible now than they used to be, and can just be bought off the shelf and incorporated into your pastries. In terms of matcha, you could go to like any Asian grocery store and get that. So I do think that it's really just getting those items and then being able to just add even like a tablespoon per your recipe, or two if you want to add a little bit more flavor. But anything you can kind of just incorporate and see how it turns out and adjust to your taste.
Rachel is no stranger to trial and error herself, and for her, there's a very special indicator of whether her experiment has been a success.
I always find it the highest compliment when somebody comes in and tells me their Asian parent came with them and they liked everything. That is like the highest level of achievement, I think, and really validating, I think, that I've like hit the palate, I think, that I'm like hoping to get.
That's all on today's dish. You can find photos from our visit to Q Bakehouse at michiganpublic.org. Today's episode was produced by Ronia Kabansag. It was edited by myself and Laura Weber Davis. Music for the show comes from Blue Dot Sessions and from Audio Network. If you'd like to get in touch, email us at thedish@michiganpublic.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.